Horrific and reckless worldwide condemnation of Russia's attack on a Ukrainian nuclear power plant. It started a fire close to one of the reactors and immediate tests for a radioactive leak. None has been found so far, but there are still concerns.
The situation is naturally continues to be extremely tense and challenging.
Also this lunchtime, foreign ministers from across Europe and NATO hold emergency talks in Brussels on what to do next.
The days to come are likely to be worse, with more death, more suffering, and more destruction.
The kindness of strangers on the Polish border offering what help they can.
This is just families arriving in their cars with the offer of a room, willing to take refugees back to their homes and offer them shelter.
Today, I have never been more proud to be a Ukrainian.
Thousands of miles away in Hollywood, a pledge to raise millions from one Ukrainian-born star. And one other story breaking this lunchtime, guilty verdicts for the mother and ex-boyfriend for killing 2-year-old Kyrell Matthews.
With cruise ship.
Good afternoon. It is the largest nuclear power plant in Europe with 6 reactor units, and despite the obvious dangers of sending missiles towards the site, last night President Putin's forces did just that. There was a fire at the Zaporizhzhia plant in the south of Ukraine after the attack and worldwide condemnation of it. Radiation levels have been monitored today, and the International Atomic Energy Agency said no radioactive material had been released. The UK's Foreign Secretary, however, called it reckless. 3 people were killed. John Ray has today's developments from across Ukraine, including more harrowing footage of the damage in its towns and cities.
The world needed no warning of the perils posed by the war in Ukraine to lands far beyond its borders. But in the Russian attack on Europe's biggest nuclear reactor, a terrible reminder of how much is at stake.
Російські війська атакували Запорізьку атомну станцію.
Russia had risked an explosion 6 times the magnitude of Chernobyl, President Volodymyr Zelensky said. The plant is now in Russian hands, and these fires that burned have been extinguished. Radiation levels are normal. This, it seems, is one catastrophe averted.
However, as you can imagine, the operator and the regulator have been telling us that the situation is naturally continues to be extremely tense and challenging because of the circumstances.
What the Russians cannot conquer, they destroy. These smouldering ruins are the remains of the town of Borodyanka, northwest of the capital. After airstrikes and artillery shells bombarded a residential area, Vladimir Putin is pounding Ukraine into submission. The same grim scenes in the port city of Mariupol, cut off and under constant fire, where this one image of a father grieving for his teenage son can only hint at the pain of so many.
They use bomb, they use rockets, multiple launch rocket systems, everything he has. Its target is both hospitals, schools, kindergartens.
In Brussels, NATO's foreign ministers are holding another emergency meeting.
The days to come are likely to be worse, with more death, more suffering, and more destruction. As the Russian armed forces bring in heavier weaponry and continue their attacks across the country.
In Moscow, President Putin warned the West not to escalate the crisis. But as the aftermath of his attack on the nuclear plant shows, it might be that he's intent on victory at any cost. John Ray, ITV News.
Our correspondent Dan Rivers travelled close to the site of the power plant in southern Ukraine this morning and sent us this update a short time ago.
Well, Europe's largest nuclear power station is on the other side of this river, the Dnieper River, and there has been some fighting near the power plant. We've seen some plumes of smoke. We understand that most of the fighting has now ceased. The International Atomic Energy Authority has said that the radiation levels are normal, that there has been no catastrophic accidents here in terms of shells hitting any of the nuclear power station. But it does highlight the potential dangers of a war in this country where there are 15 nuclear reactors. 6 of them are behind me. We understand now that it is mainly Chechen troops being supported by the Russians who are now controlling territory leading up and surrounding that power station, and they continue to push north on the other side of this river as they continue their advance.
To the capital, Kyiv now, and our Europe editor James Mates is there. Now, James, I'm sure people there, as in the rest of the world, are asking this question today. If President Putin can attack a nuclear power site, what else is he prepared to do?
Yeah, well, that is exactly as John was saying. What's he prepared to stop at? And this is very much in keeping with what the French got out of President Macron's conversation with Vladimir Putin yesterday, and saying, listen, he wants victory at any cost, and the worst is yet to come. In terms of what the world can do about it, the International Atomic Energy Agency would like to send inspectors there. Who knows if they'll be able to. In terms of any sort of NATO or other intervention, well, they've been having a foreign ministers meeting in Brussels today and have said quite firmly no NATO planes in Ukrainian airspace, no NATO troops with feet on the ground in Ukraine. Largely, of course, because the nuclear jeopardy of any NATO-Russian war would be even greater than what we're seeing in these power stations. President Putin appeared briefly on television this morning. His detachment from reality becoming increasingly evident. This is what he said: "We have no bad intentions towards our neighbours, and I would advise them not to escalate the situation." He said, "We do not see any need here to aggravate or worsen our relations. I think that everyone should think about how to normalise relations and cooperate normally." And at the same time as he's separating himself from reality, he's doing the same with the Russian people as well. The BBC and several other American and European news websites now are shut off from access to Russia, so the information blackout is more or less complete for the Russian people.
Yeah, thank you, James, and we'll have more on that situation in Moscow shortly. First, let's talk about those meetings that are happening in Brussels. In the last half hour, as we've been hearing, NATO has warned that the devastation inflicted on Ukraine is likely to get worse in the coming days. Jens Stoltenberg was speaking in Brussels. Our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan, is in Westminster. What can we expect then, Carl, from these emergency meetings in Brussels?
Well, certainly NATO is strengthening its defences along the eastern borders that are closest to this conflict. Jens Stoltenberg said there were now 130 jets involved in strengthening NATO airspace. They did discuss at that meeting the possibility of a no-fly zone over Ukraine, something that has been much discussed over recent days. But he said that they all agreed that that was not something that NATO could get involved in, as James was explaining, because the risk of a direct confrontation, of a hot war with Russia, was just too great. So at the moment, what they're doing is strengthening the border. The EU foreign ministers are about to meet alongside the foreign ministers of the United States and Ukraine, and indeed Liz Truss, the foreign secretary, will be there. We think it's the first time that a British foreign secretary has been to a meeting of EU ministers since Brexit. They will be trying to coordinate their response as well. In addition to that, Britain has just submitted a request for the UN Security Council to meet in an emergency session to discuss the attack on that nuclear power plant.
OK, Carl, thank you very much for that. And back now to what's been happening in Russia this morning. And a law has been passed to making it an offence to spread what it says is fake information about what's happening in Ukraine. But of course, it simply means access to accurate and impartial news is being further restricted by the Kremlin. International news websites have been blocked and independent news channels have been taken off air. Julia Chapman is in Moscow. And Julia, explain to us what's likely to be the implications of this new law.
Well, the law has been passed by both houses of parliament. It's now waiting for President Vladimir Putin's signature, and if he signs it, it will mean that any individual can be punished with up to 15 years in prison for putting forward a version of events in Ukraine different to the ones that the media here in Russia are putting forward and the Ministry of Defense is offering to the public. We have seen a very limited media landscape here in Russia for years, but that space that did exist is shrinking even more rapidly since the war started. Two major independent outlets closed this week, one radio station, one TV station, and now Russian language outlets are being taken offline as well. So certainly there are very few opportunities for Russians to get a picture of what is going on in Ukraine. The media regulators have banned the use of the word war, conflict or attack in the context of this conflict. They want the media to only refer to it as a special military operation. And so people here are getting a very different picture as to what is going on in Ukraine to the rest of the world.
Julia Chapman in Moscow, thank you very much. Now, there have been 9 days of attacks on major cities across Ukraine, and in the country's hospitals, medics are working around the clock to treat those who have been injured. They include Dr. Ivan Dari at a hospital in Kharkiv in the north, who spoke to me this morning of the bravery of those around him, those who choose to keep treating patients even when they had the chance to leave. They will all stay, he told us, until the end, whatever that end will be.
I cannot give you a lot of information. I can tell you that we have patients. We worked all day, all night. Our hospital was not attacked. The emotional condition of doctors, nurses, all medical staff, very good. They're very brave, very strong, very good emotional position. And all we know that hospitals, unfortunately, one of their goals, but we are ready, and our emotional condition is very good. So, and when our nurses and when somebody asked our nurses or medical staff or doctors, would they like to evacuate from this place? Nobody tell that they want to do it. So everybody stays at their job. So we work all together, and I'm very proud to stay with these wonderful people here.
So no matter how dangerous it gets there, no matter how much shelling comes your way, you are all committed to staying in the hospital come what may?
Of course, we are ready. Our emotional condition very good. We are strong, we are brave, and we will stay here to the end of the war and our all together our win. We will stay here, and it doesn't matter how it's dangerous.
What about your friends and your family outside the hospital? Can you even begin to describe what it is like to live in Kharkiv at the moment?
How it's live. Some of them live in the background and even in the night, and all of them know that Russian forces, our enemy, can attack civil buildings in each moment. So, and most of them, my friends, relatives, everybody ready to defend the city, defend our country. Of course, a lot of them scared because a lot of Air Force strikes, a lot of artillery strikes at our city, in our country. So yes, the most position that they are very strong, they are very brave, and they are ready. I'm very proud about people of Ukraine, very proud. They're wonderful.
Dr. Ivan Hari in Kharkiv. Still to come, our teams report from the Polish border as people drive hundreds of miles to help there. and a major pledge of millions of dollars from one Hollywood star who grew up in Ukraine. But first, one other story breaking this lunchtime. The mother of a 2-year-old boy and her former partner have been found guilty of killing him. A jury heard Kyrell Matthews had suffered repeated violent abuse in the weeks before his death in South London in 2019. Some of the abuse was captured in secret recordings. Chloe Keedy reports on this distressing case.
Happy birthday!
Felicia Shirley sang to her son Kyrell on his 2nd birthday. But off camera, this smiling toddler was being subjected to violent abuse.
I only figured out to say cheese.
When he died, Kyrell Matthews had 41 rib fractures and a catastrophic cut to his liver. They were injuries that had been inflicted on him by his mum and her then boyfriend, Kimar Brown. A jury today found him guilty of murder. Felicia Shirley was acquitted of murdering her son, but convicted of manslaughter.
All we're left with is basically memories, pictures, videos.
Kyrell's paternal grandfather Carl and his partner Christine said they had no idea of the horror Kyrell was being subjected to.
He was always smiling. He was always happy. He was well loved by the whole of our family. And we're going to miss him.
But Carl says he started to see less of his grandson after Kyrell's mum met Kimar Brown. The three of them becoming increasingly isolated inside her South London flat.
Hello, you're through the NHS 111 service. And what is it I can help you with today?
Basically, Kyrell, he's been acting really funny, like his body's floppy and his eyes is rolling back.
Shirley was told an ambulance was on its way and was instructed to carry out CPR on her son. Her and Brown claimed this was what caused Kyrell's injuries, but the jury didn't believe them. The court heard that Felicia Shirley would leave her phone recording inside the flat in an attempt to catch her partner secretly contacting other women. What those recordings actually captured was evidence that both of them were abusing a 2-year-old boy.
He was torturing him. He became their entertainment. That's what he was their entertainment.
I didn't know that he was going through this suffering and there was nothing that I could do to help.
Kyrell's short life was one filled with violence and pain. His grandparents say they will remember a loving, laughing boy. A boy who somehow kept smiling. Chloe Keedy, ITV News.
We are returning to our coverage of Ukraine now, and the peace talks yesterday achieved very little, but Russia did agree to temporary ceasefires to allow civilians to evacuate. More than 1 million have already left the country with little idea when they'll be able to return. When they do reach Poland, they are being met by strangers who have driven hundreds of miles to help. Our correspondent Romilly Weeks is at one of the border crossings.
Ukraine's just over there. You can see the flashing police lights in the distance. I just want to show you just what's going on right on the border here, because it is really quite extraordinary. This is one of the crossings where refugees are arriving, as you can see over here. But stretched out down here is a long line of cars, and they have come from all across Europe, from Germany, from Holland, from Czech Republic, from Slovakia, from really all over Europe. And what they're doing is, this is just families arriving in their cars with the offer of a room, willing to take refugees back to their homes and offer them shelter. And there is a man here with a walkie-talkie. He's called Sasha. He's Ukrainian. He speaks 7 languages, and he is just putting refugees in touch with families who might be able to help them. So this is self-organization. It's not happening on a governmental level or even being organized by charities. It's self-organization, but on a really impressive scale.
Romilly Weeks on the Polish border. Finally from us, long before she was a Hollywood star, Mila Kunis was a little girl growing up in Ukraine when it was part of the Soviet Union. Today, she said she's never been more proud to be Ukrainian as she and her husband, the actor Ashton Kutcher, promised to match donations for the aid effort of up to $3 million. In an Instagram post, Mila said there is no place in the world for this kind of unjust attack on humanity. Here's Sangeeta Kandola.
I was born in Chernovtsi, Ukraine in 1983. I came to America in 1991. Today, I have never been more proud to be a Ukrainian.
And I've never been more proud to be married to a Ukrainian.
A very personal, heartfelt message from Mila Kunis. From her home in Hollywood, she has watched her home country, Ukraine, under attack. She is reaching out to help those now classed as refugees.
The events that have unfolded in Ukraine are devastating. There is no place in this world for this kind of unjust attack. So Ashton and I have decided to match up to $3 million worth of donations in an effort to raise $30 million.
The actress joins a growing list of Hollywood A-listers hoping to boost humanitarian aid for those displaced. Blake Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds shared their pledge on social media to match up to $1 million in aid, creating double the support.
In an instant, 1 million people in Ukraine have been forced to flee, many without shelter, food and water.
Celebrities here have also been using their voices to help those in need. The Disasters Emergency Committee is appealing for donations and have thanked the Queen for her generous private pledge. But for Mila Kunis, the issue runs deep and she is asking us to dig deeper.
We need to support the people of Ukraine. Please help us.
Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
And that is how things are this lunchtime. The latest developments are on our website, constantly updated at itv.com/news. But from everyone here, bye-bye.